Modern homes on Firestone plantations. With a change of foliage, these settings might be scenes in the better suburbs of any American city. And this up-to-date dispensary would do credit to any modern community anywhere. Liberian technicians in many fields are proof of how far the nation has progressed, for Liberia is advancing. To keep pace with this advance, schools are training native youth. One of the outstanding trade schools of Liberia is the Booker Washington Institute at Kakata, where boys from the tribes are taught manual skills and scientific agriculture. What is bringing about this development? What is the reason for Liberia's advancement? Well, there are many reasons, but a basic one is this. Latex, the initial harvest of natural rubber. It is the white blood which, flowing through the veins and arteries of Liberia, nourishes its growth and sustains its progress. Liberia has gained much of its stature from the unending flow of rubber, which ranks with steel, petroleum, aluminum, and copper as an essential material of modern life. Today in Liberia, the jungle is continually giving way to orderly rows of rubber trees. Production of plantation rubber fits readily into the agrarian life which Liberian people have lived for centuries. Liberian rubber planting is a formidable undertaking. It begins with the clearing of hundreds and thousands of acres of tall forests and dense jungle. The vanguard of any rubber operation is an army of men with axes. To fell these giant trees, some of which are centuries old and as much as 10 feet in diameter, teams of axemen, using a narrow-headed axe, chop deftly and in a steady tempo. The jungle's cry of surrender is the deep-throated rumbling of big trees crashing to earth. A visitor watching the clearing of Liberian jungle lands for the first time commented that for every fallen tree, he saw at least a dozen men working. The newcomer saw more or less correctly. It takes lots of men, men with strong arms, sturdy backs, and sharp cutlasses. For the dense, wiry, matted undergrowth does not give up its long hold on the land without a struggle. The steady, unified beat of the cutting is no accident. The work is paced by the beat of native drums. In the past generation, more than 80,000 acres of Liberian rubber lands have been cleared in this manner. In order finally to clear the land, the felled jungle growth is burned. The burning is done during the dry season. Hundreds, sometimes thousands of acres of land are cleared by a single fire. Armed with long bamboo torches, workmen with a cautious eye to wind direction set the fire systematically. Without careful planning and extreme caution, a fire could easily get out of hand and become a serious threat to life and property. Through the years, there have been almost no accidents. Impressive testimony to the know-how of these men. Smoke in the tropic sky is a good sign for Liberia. It means more land being made ready for more rubber. The seeds of rubber trees are planted in nurseries to provide stock for later transplanting to the cleared areas. Each plantation or rubber growing division has a nursery where these nut-like seeds are planted. Within a few months, the seeds become young trees. In this nursery, the seedlings are changed to high-yielding trees by means of a scientific process called bud grafting. This means grafting the living bud of a proven high-yielding clone or strain of rubber onto the root system of a hardy seedling. The seedling alone, however healthy and rugged, is rarely a high producer of rubber latex. Bud grafting assures a higher yield. Successful bud grafting requires outstanding manual skill. First, a window is cut in the bark of the seedling. Next, a living bud is cut from a tree that is known to be a high producer of latex. This bud is trimmed and placed into the window. Then it is bound in place. The wound is taped and sealed with wax as a double protection against weather and insects. Several weeks later, after it has been determined that the bud graft is successful, the seedling top is cut away. In time, the grafted shoot from the new bud becomes the trunk and top of a rubber tree that grows from healthy seedling roots. After a successful bud grafting has been made, the young tree looks like this and becomes what is called clonal rubber. This tree is ready for planting. In the newly cleared areas, workmen are busy at lining and holing, aligning the rows and digging the holes that will anchor the young trees in permanent groves. The land is surveyed to make certain that the rows are straight and evenly spaced. The tree locations are carefully measured and marked with poles. For the most part, the soil is a rich clay loam called laterite. It is highly fertile and is red with iron. The entire operation is geared to exacting standards. Even so simple a task as digging a hole is governed by predetermined measurements. With the hole dug to the proper depth and width, the previously budded root is anchored carefully. In rich earth, under equatorial rains and sun, the young rubber trees grow rapidly. This one is 15 months old. These 2 years old. And these 3 years old. It can no longer be said that all rubber trees look alike. Various strains or clones of Hevea differ widely in appearance. Some of the tops are rounded, others are tall and spare. The bud-grafted rubber trees of Liberia far out-yield the ancestral wild Hevea trees which are native to the Amazon basin of South America. Here is real horticultural progress. After 5 or 6 years, a very brief interval in its life, the Liberian Hevea tree is sufficiently mature to be tapped. Careful measurement of the trunk diameter determines whether it is ready for tapping. A wooden caliper is used to make these measurements. Tests are made which indicate the probable yields of new trees. After the tests are completed, the stand of trees is reduced from about 185 per acre to about 110 carefully selected trees. Marking the tapping panel conforms to exacting standards of height, angle of slope, and bark measurements. First is marked the area of bark which will eventually be consumed in tapping the tree. The producing life of a rubber tree must be measured in terms of the precious bark. Each time the tree is tapped, an average of 180 times a year, another thin strip of bark will be lost. The first tapping cut is made at the precise slope of 30 degrees. Opening the tapping panel requires a sharp knife and a trained and steady hand. And there begins to ooze forth the first drops of the hundreds of gallons of latex that the tree will produce during its long life. Liberia's millions of rubber trees require the services of more than 30,000 workers. Rubber tapping begins with the day itself. At first dawn, from the native villages that dot the plantations, long files of tappers set forth. On a large rubber plantation, the tapper is the aristocrat among the workmen. Rubber tappers are the most expert of tree surgeons. Each man has had long days of individual instruction and has served apprentice training in this exacting craft. Each tapper heads for his task of from 250 to 300 trees. He is equipped with a specially designed tapping knife, 2 latex buckets that hold a total of about 12 gallons, a shoulder bar to help carry the buckets, a bag for scrap rubber, and a bottle of chemical that delays the coagulation of the latex. Each tapper tends the same trees month after month and comes to know each one of them intimately. Each tree has its own individual characteristics. The tapper gets to know the trees so well that in some instances he has been known to invent pet names for them. First, the tapper removes the thin string of latex which has coagulated from a previous morning's tapping. This is highly precise work, cutting within the thickness of a sheet of thin paper. For the latex oozes from cells located between the outer and the cambium or inner bark layer. A dash of anticoagulant and he's ready for the next tree. Ordinarily, each tree is tapped on alternate days. Roughly 1/3 of the weight of the latex that flows from the tree will become dry rubber. The desperate need for rubber during World War II prompted Firestone to innovate a harvest routine that would increase the yield of a single tree. The usual one-level tapping was supplemented by a second tapping at a higher level. This intensive harvest routine produced thousands of additional tons of rubber, which were of life or death importance to our fighting forces. High panel tapping made shock troops of millions of Liberian rubber trees. That gong means that it is time to collect the latex. Tapping is done in the early hours because the late morning heat slows the flow of this liquid. Rubber is in these buckets. Thousands of pounds of rubber in these thousands of gallons of milk-like latex. Latex is an unstable chemical compound. And from now on, men, chemistry, and bacteriology will be fighting for time to convert this valuable white liquid into useful rubber. The pace is slower now, for the buckets are heavy with the liquid harvest. The latex is collected at a division station. Each station serves many hundreds of tappers. Some idea of the scope of the Firestone operation in Liberia can be obtained from the fact that on the Firestone plantations there are dozens of these stations. Inside the station, the crop of each tapper is weighed, recorded, and poured into a receiving tank. Each station receives several thousands of gallons of latex every day. From the division collection station, the latex is carried to the central processing factory. At the Firestone processing factory at Harvey, the largest of its kind in the world, the fresh latex is converted into several commercial grades of rubber. Hauling of the latex is done by tank trucks. This one has a capacity of 1,800 gallons. It takes an extensive fleet of these to transport a single day's crop of latex to the processing factories. Here in a bubbling white stream is the beginning of an airplane tire, a surgeon's glove, an oxygen mask, an air brake coupling, a life raft, a giant tractor tire, or any one of 1,000 other commodities without which our daily living would be seriously handicapped. The cream of the crop goes into rows of centrifuges, heavily powered machines which work like cream separators. After centrifuging, the latex is highly concentrated to about 60% dry rubber equivalent. This concentrate is shipped in bulk or in drums and is used to make such products as Fomex mattresses, surgical goods, and many other valuable and specialized items. Other latex is processed as dry rubber. The addition of an acid helps it to coagulate in big vats. When partly solidified, the blubber, as it is called at this stage, is chopped into big slices. These hunks of blubber are sent down chutes to a line of power-operated mangles and washers. The rollers squeeze out most of the water content and shape the rubber into lacy white pads. These pads presently become sheets of rubber and are hung up to dry in enclosed rooms where the temperature is precisely controlled. From the drying room, the sheet rubber is placed in hydraulic presses. These compress it into solid, bouncy bales, which are carefully wrapped with sheet rubber, then labeled with the proper grade marks. Each bale weighs 224 pounds, 10 bales to the long ton, the standard measure of rubber weight. The baled rubber is loaded aboard lighters, which carry the cargo down Liberia's Farmington River to the open sea. Like most other rubber operations, the loading usually begins early in the morning. The shipping routine involved is unusual. The cargoes originate at a river pier near the inland processing factory. This river and others like it serve Liberia as commercial highways. The heavily laden lighters travel downriver into an ocean front cluttered with sandbars. To pass over these, the lighters are built to have shallow draft. Once in ocean water, these small and heavily burdened boats frequently find the going rough. The lighter's destination is a freighter anchored a short way out at sea. With its loading on the freighter, the Liberian chapter of the story of rubber comes to a close. For here, the rubber leaves its birthplace and begins its journey to a world that depends on it to do 1,000 vital jobs in 1,000,000 places. The fact that a rubber production enterprise of international significance exists in Liberia today is the result of the vision and courage of a prominent American who in the early 1920s became convinced that Americans should produce their own rubber. This, in order to assure supplies of the vital material and to safeguard American consumers from the tyrannies of alien rubber cartels. This industrial pioneer was Harvey S. Firestone, founder of the Firestone Tire and Rubber Company, who built a worldwide organization which required ever-increasing quantities of rubber. In practical support of his conviction, the Firestone organization began a survey of rubber-producing areas. The search was actively directed by Harvey S. Firestone, Jr., who, after a study of many tropical lands, selected Liberia for the Firestone rubber plantations. Under his direction, the Firestone Plantations Company has changed what was a massive jungle in 1924 to orderly plantations of more than 75,000 acres of high-producing rubber trees. As present head of the Firestone Worldwide Organization, Harvey S. Firestone, Jr. continues to demonstrate how Americans can produce their own rubber. The caliber of industrial statesmanship which has developed the Firestone organization presupposes a never-ending improvement of product. Research is paramount at Firestone, whose watchword is, best today, still better tomorrow. At the Plantations laboratory, Americans and Liberians work together. While their primary concern is the improvement of the quality of rubber, this outpost also contributes in many ways to general scientific knowledge. A byproduct of rubber research is the introduction and proving of new and better crops which benefit Liberia and other tropical countries. Crops like oil palms and bananas are now flourishing. Also being studied at an experimental farm are the problems of successfully raising livestock under tropical conditions. But the efficient operation of an enterprise as large as this one must go beyond the confines of objective research. Many of the truly great resources of Liberia do not yield economic returns, but are of great and lasting human value. Schools, churches, and hospitals are among these resources. It has always been the desire of Firestone to contribute to the social and human, as well as the economic progress of Liberia. Over the years, Firestone has established free schools, modern hospitals, and well-staffed clinics, and has cooperated with the churches in their efforts to help the people of Liberia. This is one of 3 schools on the Firestone plantations, supported by Firestone and supervised by the Liberian government. These grade schools are for the free use of children of employees. Their curriculum differs little from that of any primary school in the United States. To maintain a high standard of health and sanitation in the tropics require large and varied medical staff. Smallpox, for example, is a formidable and ever-threatening enemy. The only effective weapon against it is mass vaccination. In each of the dozens of villages on the plantations are at least 2 native medical attendants who perform vaccinations, administer first aid, care for minor ailments, and make preliminary diagnoses. All serious cases are sent to the Plantation Base Hospital, a modern medical institution where free care and services are provided for all employees and their families. Here in a land of tribal living are facilities and medical skills that would do credit to any well-equipped American hospital. Research in tropical medicine is a logical byproduct of safeguarding health. Expert African technicians working with the staff of American physicians and surgeons are daily pushing back the frontiers of tropical medicine. The Liberia Institute of the American Foundation for Tropical Medicine, made possible from a grant in memory of Harvey S. Firestone, will progressively provide for Liberia an international medical research center. But the needs of any people anywhere do not end with being healthy. As civilization has advanced in Liberia, so have the routine needs of civilized living. The United States Trading Company, a kind of department store, carries up-to-date American merchandise at prices substantially below those of any other retail establishment in the country. Here, American brand names are thoroughly familiar to Liberian customers. But no amount of modern merchandising will ever take the place of the natives' love for bargaining and display. So in this land of surprising contrasts, it is not surprising that right next door to the United States Trading Company, one finds a native market doing a flourishing business. Every day of the year, tribespeople bring to market the products of their own farming, hunting, and handicrafts. This girl's well-balanced burden is sweet home-baked bread. The displays at the market are carefully and attractively arranged. This native merchant offers a widely varied assortment of native peppers, palm nuts for oil and gravies. Liberian oranges are exceptionally sweet and juicy. Dried minnows are a delicacy. Hand-worked ivory and jewelry. The golden leopard pelt is a valuable item of export. Country cloth, home woven of wool or cotton, is a popular article of barter. It is widely used for bedding, draperies, and wearing apparel. The native taste in colors runs most frequently to blues. Second only to the love of bartering is the desire to play. Dances, songs, games, and acrobatic acts are an integral part of the village life. Each to his own. Americans living in Liberia have provided their own favorite forms of recreation. Africa may be the last place where one would expect to find a golf course. But this one on the Firestone Plantations has been enjoyed by thousands of American travelers and servicemen who have passed through Liberia. Its popularity proves that golf is a good game anywhere. The close bond of democracy that exists between Liberia and the United States is exemplified by the capital city, Monrovia, which was named for American President James Monroe. In this capital are many reminders of the American colonists who founded the country. The motto of these early settlers, "The love of liberty brought us here," still has living meaning. Like any capital city, Monrovia is dotted with government buildings. Many of its buildings offer tangible evidence of the nation's interest in education, culture, and democratic government. This is the Legislative Hall, where the nation's lawmakers meet. Here they are assembled to hear an address by the President of Liberia. At the opening of each session of the legislature, it is customary for the President to deliver an address on the state of the nation. All Liberia's lawmakers, like those of the United States, are elected by public ballot. Yesterday, a little-known frontier of civilization, Monrovia is fast becoming one of the most important deep-water ports in Africa. This impressive harbor was completed in 1947, exactly 100 years after the founding of the Republic. This, then, is the story of Liberia. A story of land and people, of resources and progress, of enterprise and expansion. It is the story of a nation founded by free men. A nation that stands as a beacon light of freedom on the fringe of what was once called the Dark Continent. The story of Liberia is without beginning and without end. For here, the past and the present are but steps to the eternal promise of the future.